Let's just do that with a more interesting example to practice it. We'll have a 9r plus a 2q. And we'll multiply that by a 9r minus a 2q. I'm going to go ahead and FOIL it out and then use the pattern. So first let's FOIL that. We'll have first 9r times 9r is 81r squared. Outside, minus 18r cubed. Inside, plus 18r cubed. And last, minus 4q squared. Again, very conveniently, those two add to 0, and they're out of there. What are we left with? We're left with 81r squared minus 4q squared. Now let's look back at this in terms of the pattern, which is happily sitting right there on the page. If we looked at this and said, oh, I have two things added up, and I have those same two things subtracted, let me just look at this entire 9r and treat it like that x. And let's look at that entire 2q and treat it like the y. When we did this for the simpler case of x plus y times x minus y, we had x squared minus y squared. Let's see if we get the same thing. Here, if I take 9r and I square it, and I will get 81r squared. If I take the 2q and I square it, I will get a 4q squared. This pattern suggests I just write down the 81r squared and subtract the 4q squared. And that's indeed how our answer worked out. So you can skip that whole FOIL process and go directly to that answer if you like the pattern. And now that I've added all these letters, let me just write that pattern out again for you. Again, you can get there by FOIL or by using the pattern. The third special pattern that we were going to look at is the square of a binomial. So we have something like x plus y squared. What we have to do, and it's very important that you recognize this, is say, aha, that means x plus y times x plus y. Don't try to take any shortcuts to get to this point. Write it out until you're very accustomed to the pattern, and then use the pattern. Let's go ahead and FOIL that. And we'll have first x squared plus outside xy, inside xy, and last y squared. Well, we can again add up the two middle terms, and we'll get x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. This pattern is going to hold true no matter how fancy the terms in the place of the x and the y get. And we'll apply that in an example. The other kind of square you might see is a subtraction instead of an addition, or a difference rather, that's being squared. And if you FOIL that out, what you'll find, let me just write this down here again, is that you end up with x squared, just like you did in the first case. But now you're going to have minus 2xy plus y squared. So if you like using the patterns, the only thing that changes is this one sign right here from an addition to a subtraction. And again, you can always FOIL. Let's apply that pattern on an example, and instead of doing a FOIL and showing how the pattern fits, we'll just apply it directly to the pattern, or the pattern directly to the example. Let's take z plus 3q, and we'll square it. We have a binomial, and it's been squared. We want to recognize that we can either write it out and FOIL it, or use this pattern. If we want to use the pattern, well, that 2z is in the same place as the x, so we treat that like the x. And the 3q is going to be treated just like the y that we saw earlier. Well, our pattern had an answer where we had x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. The way that'll work out here is we'll take our 2z and we'll square it, and you can write that off to the side. 2z squared is 2z quantity squared is going to get us 4 times z squared, so that's going to go here. We need to figure out what 2xy is, or 2 times the first times the last in here. So we'll have 2 times the 2z times the 3q. 4 times 3 is 12, zq. That goes under the 2xy in our pattern. And then finally, for the y squared piece of our pattern, we're going to look at the 3q and square that, and we'll get a 9 times q squared. And that's our answer. You got all this stuff written down below. That would be scratch paper work probably, or on the margin work. The advantage here is that once you're accustomed to the pattern, you can more quickly come up with this answer. And again, when you start undoing multiplication by factoring, some of these patterns are going to come up a lot. So they're useful to at least have in the back of your mind.